This nation was founded by men of many nations and backgrounds. It was founded on the principle that all men are created equal, and that the rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened.
Coming at you from a hidden location deep in the woods somewhere in Texas. Slightly overweight, probably intoxicated, nevertheless mercifully insatiable alpha male. This is the Juliet Delta Podcast. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I am Juliet Delta, and welcome to the Juliet Delta Podcast. This is episode 2. I hope we learned, or I know I learned quite a few valuable lessons in episode 1, especially with audio. I'm going to hope that this is going to come out a little bit better for you. We're still working on getting some more equipment. This is all self-funded by me, Juliet Delta. So, we're going to do it as it goes along. Here or there, we're going to add some more equipment, hopefully boost the audio quality. So we're going to get right into it today. Being that this weekend, I guess Friday, the government shut down, whatever that really means. If people start losing their welfare checks, if their people's welfare and social programs get cut in half, and this lasts, weeks or even months, we're liable to see some serious issues. Crime will definitely go up, obviously. There could be some major, uprisings, and especially in some inner cities, larger cities. The communities that receive the majority of that social welfare is probably going to react negatively. They feel entitled to that. They feel it's their right to get. So we're probably going to have some issues there if that continues. But I figured that was a good time, and as I promised, to go on into our first real podcast, our first real topic. I don't really count the first episode as our first real one because it's more of just an introduction to what we're all about. So, as promised, the title of this podcast is Why People Vote Democrat. I know that the title alone will probably make some people, probably a lot of people, cringe a little bit. And that's strange to me. I don't think there's anything critical about it. I think black people, are proud that they vote Democrat. They don't have any shame in that. And I don't think it's in any way negative to even ask the question why black people vote Democrat. But just saying that line, because I've said it to people in front of people, they get real quiet. They're like, oh, stop, hey, that's real racist. How's that racist? They're worried that it might appear racist, even if it's not. You're not allowed to criticize the black community if you're white. I think that's horseshit. I think that it's a fair question. It's a reasonable question. And if you want me to treat everyone as equals and as equal in value as human beings, then I ought to be able to ask you a question as a group that I'd ask any other group. I'd ask a group of white people, a critical question about something that I think that they're doing that's against their better judgment. So why can't I ask black people the same thing? They're equal. I'm going to treat them as equal. I think when we try to treat people, and especially when white people, it's a form of racism that they don't even realize when they pretend that black people are going to get their feelings hurt so easy and everything's so touchy. You're saying that they're not capable, that black people aren't capable of having an intelligent conversation. And I disagree with that. I say we ought to treat everyone as if they can have an intelligent conversation until they prove otherwise to me, regardless of their skin color, creed, religion, education. Doesn't matter to me. You prove to me you can't volley the intellectual ball back over the net. If you can't, then now I know where we are. But until you can't do it, and you prove to me you can't do it, I'm not going to sit here and based on your skin color, assume that your feelings are worn on your sleeve and you're incapable of having a reasonable, logical, conversation about your own culture with somebody that just happens to not be in, a member of your own, circle in your culture. So I think that that's ridiculous. I think that we need to change our mindset. I think white people have been beat down so bad, and a majority of it is from other white people, to feel this white guilt that if they can't even say or do anything, and they have to go above and beyond to prove that they're not racist. You're either a racist or you're not. There's some real racists in this world, and I think having that attitude diminishes the real, racists in this world. When you just make everybody that's, because they're white, they're automatically a racist. No, how about let's focus on the very, very small minority of people, the black and white, that are racist, and let's try to get rid of that instead of pretending everybody because they were born a lot lighter skinned than you, they're just automatically racist. That's total horseshit. Anyway, back to the topic. I told you in the first episode I have a tendency to ramble, and I do. So, why people vote Democrat? So, why do people in America vote Democrat? It's not something most of us ever think about. Matter of fact, it's just a fact of life. I think everyone in my generation, I'm in my late 30s, even in my dad's generation, probably, for sure, in my dad's generation, and he's in his 60s. So pretty much everyone alive except for some, very, very elderly people. But the last couple of generations, including, the ones before me and after me, black people vote Democrat. It's just a fact of life. Most of us assume that's the way it's always been and probably always will be. But ironically, that couldn't be further from the truth. I'm going to be painting with a really broad brush here, and I'm going to ask everyone out there listening to grant me some leeway, because obviously there are exceptions to the rules. You could say men are stronger than women. Well, yeah, generally speaking, but there are women that are stronger than some men. But let's just face it, physically, painting with a broad brush, if you take a man and a woman, most of the time, most men, your average man, your average woman that have the same lifestyle, the same workout routine, a man is physically stronger. That's why in the Olympics, women don't compete against the men, because those people are athletes of the highest level. They're athletes at the highest level of their respective specific sport. And at the height, men are physically faster, stronger, jump higher. Their bodies are just made that way. It's just genetics. It doesn't mean women are less valuable. That's why they stand and compete against other women, and their gold medal is just as valuable as a men's gold medal. But it's just not fair. It's not fair to compete them against each other. So when I say that, that's what I mean by when I use the word blacks and black culture in this podcast, I'm painting with a broad brush. I'm talking about the majority of the community, the majority of that black culture and society. And there's tons and tons of people that I run into that agree with me and that are black and think that they don't want to be a part of that or recognize with that culture. There's also the majority of black people that walk around every day that want to be, that is their culture. They embrace it. So grant me some leeway. Paint with a broad brush. When I say blacks, I'm talking about the culture as a whole. All right. So let's get straight to some facts. Let's just throw some facts out there to get started. Gallup polls, from 2012 all the way back to 2000. We can look at Gallup polls, and they reference exactly how blacks voted in presidential elections. So we'll start with 2012. 95% of black people voted Democrat. 2008, 99% of black people voted Democrat. 2004 presidential election, 94% of black people voted Democrat. And in 2000, 95% of black people voted Democrat. So, obviously, you see that little spike there, 2008. That's the first year that obviously Obama ran. So, obviously, even if you had some people that maybe didn't agree with the Democrat Party, let's face it, there's probably plenty of black people out there that didn't even care anything about his policies, but he was recognized as a black man, the first potential black president, and they probably didn't care about anything else but that. Matter of fact, I mean, they've done tons of polls and research. There are a lot of black people that said, I don't care anything about his policies. I'm voting for him strictly because he's black. Hey, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I mean, it is wrong, but it is what it is. It's just part of why you probably have that little spike there from 94, 95% up to 99, basically 100%. So in 2012, several polls and researchers compiled data, and the result was that only 1% of black people consider themselves strong Republicans. And these are diehard Republicans that they feel like they understand the Democrat Party is not for them. They vote Republican no matter what. And there was only 2% considered them soft Republicans. It's more of, hey, I vote Republican, maybe some Libertarian, and hey, I'll probably vote for a Democrat if he's a black guy. Whatever. At best we get a result of a grand total of maybe 3% possibly voting, Democrat on a regular basis. That's if everybody that says they identify as Republican does it. So in late May of 1865, a long time ago, well over 100 years ago, May 1865, 100% of black people considered themselves Republican. 100%. And who could blame them? Although most Southern men didn't fight for the Confederate Army for the cause or ideal to preserve slavery, it obviously became the issue. It was twisted into that. Victor's right history, and Lincoln made sure, and so did the Republican Party, to write history as the Civil War was about slavery. Most soldiers didn't fight for slavery. They didn't give a shit. As a matter of fact, slavery was for 95+% of the people fighting the Civil War. Slavery was something that hurt them economically. Most historical experts agree that less than 5% of Southern landowners in the South owned slaves. Some even say that number could be as low as 3% or less. So why did over 95% of the Southerners go off to fight in a war? Why would poor farmers, ranchers, and pioneers go off to fight so that only maybe one wealthy person in their county that owned slaves could continue to own slaves? These wealthy slave owners were their direct competition, especially if there was one or two in their entire county. They're the big box store at the time. You're growing crops that's a commodity. Let's say cotton, for example. And you're out there with your sons and your family and your 3 brothers and their sons. And there's, 20 of you total, not to mention the women and the young girls out there doing all the other women work they can do. If you take all those people working, that family, the men, the women, the children, in a family to harvest a commodity crop, you can't compete. You can't compete with the guy down there that's got 200 slaves that he didn't even have to pay labor for. So they're the big box store. They can sell their cotton cheaper, so they can they can control the price and market of cotton. They can sell it cheaper than you can even make a profit on if they wanted to. So these guys are not your friend. Of the 95% of the people that went off, definitely that went off to fight. The guys owning the slaves, they were the enemy. They were the people causing them not to have food on their table some nights. They were etching out a life in a wilderness, pioneers. And they had no love for these people that had slaves. They just couldn't compete with slave owners. Outlawing slavery would set a much more level playing field and make much of the 95% that didn't own slaves that went off to fight much more successful in life. They left their homes barefoot, without supplies, and leaving their family without the protection of a man of the house. I mean, think about it. You're talking about living out in a wilderness with a cabin, and you're trying to grow crops and etch out a world. I just told you, all the men and the sons and the nephews, and they're the ones out there doing growing the crops. They're the ones out there doing the harvesting. You take those away to go off to war. That leaves only women. That leaves only the women and children out there to do all the work. Not to mention all the dangers. There were Indians, depending on where you were located at, that posed potential threats. Other people that wanted to come in and rob their land and destroy their crop. You come in and destroy somebody's crops. What you're doing is you're basically taking out your competition. So there were tons of danger, not to mention, just everything else living in the wild. All the work that had to be done. You had to go, you had to go get, food every day, meat every day, everything that needed to be done. It was vital to have men and women all doing their respective roles to keep everybody going. But they left and left the children and the women to take care of all of this. Why would these men take such risks, especially when it's in their best interest? Why would they go off to fight so that their competition could keep slaves and keep this, be able to have this advantage against them? It wasn't to preserve slavery. They were men of principles and flat out said no president would tell them how to live. They believed in federalism. It had been going on since the founding of our country. Each state was a respective country in a union that had joined together, and they said, you know what? A president had never told me how to live in Texas or Mississippi or wherever, and they're not going to do it now. Lincoln was smart. He used the issue of slavery to be the issue that he wanted to tell them how they had to live. But that's not why the South seceded. The South seceded and the states seceded over taxes, and they were being done wrong, and they felt like, hey, this is Britain 2.0. We're walking away. Well, later on, after the Civil War was going, which you can call it the Civil War. I call it the War of Northern Aggression because that's what it was. The South said, we're out. We don't want to be part of this crap anymore. We're getting screwed in the deal. And, we walked into this. We're going to walk right back out. And the North said, Lincoln, the Republicans said, nope, not going to do it. Yeah, we need you. We need your money. And it's worth 600,000 plus lives to ensure I keep a union together of all these states. And, they were free and sovereign people of their respective states. And they just said, we're not going to be ruled by a king, even if that king's edicts gave them a sizable advantage in life to be successful and prosper. They stood on their principle. We're going to delve into why I think the men of the Confederate don't get their due respect. But that's better tackled in another article. So back to political parties. We had Northern and Southern Democrats that were pro-slavery. And then we had Republicans in the North that were pro-emancipation. So while we know that blacks couldn't vote near as freely as white could in 1865, we're going back to 1865, logic alone would tell us that nearly 100% would consider themselves a Republican. I mean, let's face it. You can bet that I would consider myself a Republican and vote Republican if I was allowed to vote. I mean, I'm sure that most would have. And if you take a look, most credible historians agreed that this is indeed the case. I mean, you got one group that wants you in chains working on a cotton field, and all the horrible things that come with slavery. And you got one group that says, no, be free. Who are you going to vote for? If no other reason but that, you're going to vote Republican, 100% across the board. I can't think of a single black person, unless they were black people that owned slaves, would vote for the Democrat Party. So hold on a second. Got to get me a swig of this brown water here. I'm drinking a pretty good whiskey right now. We're going to take a little pause just for a second. I'm drinking Bullet whiskey. I like the rye. It's in the green label. They make 3. Actually, I think they make 4 now. But there are 3 main labels. You got your red label, which is just your regular whiskey, your green label, which is your rye, and your 10-year, which is, it's, $10 more a fifth. And to me, the green label rye tastes better. It's $10 less. So if you want, I'm not sponsored by them. I love to be sponsored by Bullet, but that's my number 1 whiskey right now. Are there better whiskeys and bourbons on the market? Scotches? You bet. But for the money, I don't think there's a better whiskey on the market to drink straight on the rocks. A little splash of water, maybe that first couple of glasses, then you can just drink it straight on the rocks. Best whiskey for your money. I love smoking cigars. We're going to have a whole podcast about cigars. You're going to drink cigars. You're going to drink whiskey and smoke cigars. I believe in finding good value. I can't afford to smoke $20 cigars every day, and I can't afford to drink a whiskey that costs, $20, $30 a glass. But I don't want to drink rot gut whiskey and smoke, Swisher Sweets either. So take a little pause there. Not sponsored by them, not sponsored by anybody. This is only episode 2. Just letting you know, I enjoy a good glass of brown water. A little pinch of snuff in my mouth right now. I can't smoke a cigar in the house just because I don't want to. I don't want to stink it up. I do that outside, and it's been cold here, so I've kind of been off the cigars the last few weeks. We'll start on that here before too long when the weather gets better. So anyway, let me take a swig of this little brown water I got here over the rocks. Wet my whistle. So why did blacks make a complete 180 and go from identifying 100% Republican, basically, to almost 100% Democrat now? Why would they leave a party that no doubt supported their freedom and liberty and then pledge allegiance to a party that fought with all their might to keep them enslaved? For over 100 years, blacks still identified as Republican at rates well over 95%. So we're going to have to delve deep, deep into history to find that moment when the flip began. Now, some would argue that it was around, 1948 when Democrat President Harry Truman made an explicit appeal to Congress for new civil rights measurements. Blacks supported the Democrat Party unquestionably elevated during this time. Why wouldn't they? But we have to stop and acknowledge that we have to acknowledge that blacks in 1947 already aligned equally between the two parties. 50% already voted Democrat and 50% already voted Republican. So the switch had already begun. Some scholars point us to the Civil Rights Acts of 1964, even later. When President Lyndon B. Johnson signed that bill, he reportedly said that as a result, Democrats would lose the South for a generation. He was wrong. The South has never gone back. You look at the South votes Republican, and there's a reason for that, and we'll go into that one day. So we must also note that blacks were already voting more heavily for Democrats and Republicans prior to President Johnson signing this bill into law. So at no time since 1936 have blacks supported a Republican candidate by more than 40%. Can you imagine that? They didn't even, they're voting for a party that wanted to keep them enslaved. You got to wonder why. So I want you to turn your focus. You can do your own research if you want to. I did. Let's turn to the 1930s, the Great Depression. We had the Roaring 20s. Everything was going great. Black people were still in a pretty bad situation in society. They were, almost second-class citizens in many cases. So the Roaring 20s were, although good for everyone, let's face it, it wasn't as good for black people as it was for white people in the 20s. So when the Great Depression, it crushed everyone, almost every single person. But no one group probably felt this impact more than blacks. But they were already, They weren't feeling as good as white people during the Roaring 20s. So when things got bad, they were already, not as well off. So they felt it as much as anybody. And more than anybody, probably. So FDR's New Deal is where I'm going to narrow the spotlight down. The idea of social programs first began in America. From that point until now, over $22 trillion have been spent on well-meaning welfare programs for the poor. The Democrats assaulted the black population with these programs, but they dressed them up in compassion and social justice. Welfare benefits began to rise. They began to rise at a staggering pace. In 1974, such benefits were an astounding 20 times higher than they had been just, 9 years earlier in 1965? The most devastating byproduct of this mushrooming welfare state was the corrosive effect it had on American family life, particularly in the black community, as provisions in welfare laws offered ever-increasing economic incentives for shunning marriage and avoiding the formation of two-parent families. illegitimately rates rose dramatically. Programs such as food stamps, public housing, Medicaid, daycare, and temporary assistance to needy families, these things all penalized marriage and the family. The case can be made that these welfare programs caused at least 50% of the disintegration of the black family. Blacks began to see their interest in the Democrat Party because they were giving away all this free stuff. The Democrats know that if you kill a culture of a family unit in black society, you can create dependency. So they dressed up this charity, this "we care about you," but it came with a catch. To take it, you got to self-destruct yourself. And not really self-destruct. You got to choose a lifestyle and a culture that is destructive to your culture and lifestyle. You got to choose behaviors that destroy your community and your society that you live in. So Democrats know that their programs will never elevate black people to real success. They don't want them to have great success. They want them to stay dependent on them. Because as long as blacks think the Democrats have their best interests at heart, they will vote for their own short-sighted interests, even at their own peril. Look, we'll let you be equal, and we'll help you become equal by giving you these handouts. Most black people were willing to take it. Basically, Democrats saw, an easy target. They said, hey, these people will eat this up because it's that or continue to suffer, the way they've been suffering. And we can give them some promises, but in doing so, we're going to destroy their culture and make them forever dependent. A cycle of dependency that will basically be unbroken unless, there are enough black leaders stand up and start changing the culture. And, that's not going to happen. Not right now, it's not happening. As a matter of fact, it's going the opposite direction. So the devastating societal consequences of family breakdown cannot be overstated. The poverty rate for single mother households is several times higher than households with both a father and a mother. It doesn't matter what color you are. Likewise, they occupy the lowest rung on the economic ladder. So according to Robert Rector, senior research fellow with the Heritage Foundation, the absence of marriage increases the frequency of child poverty 700%. And Martin Luther King Jr. said, nothing is so much needed as a secure family life for a people to pull themselves out of poverty. These single-parent homes that Democrats created have profound disadvantages. Higher rates of physical and emotional abuse, emotional disorders, drug use, poor performance in school leading to dropouts, and people not even going to college. These things lead down an even darker road, and that's a life of crime. I'm not going to go into the statistics of blacks in our prison system here today, but the cycle of crime is one of the leading causes of poverty. So it's this vicious cycle that the Democrats were very crafty and saw an easy mark. This poverty then forces blacks back into dependency. They can't ever get out. These democratic policies have caused black culture in some respects to be functionally inferior to white culture. And it's just so upsetting and disappointing to me that black people can't see this. They can't see that they're choosing, their own culture to be inferior to white culture simply to take a handout, but they can't get out of it. So as George Mason, university professor at Walter E. Williams, puts it, the welfare state has done to black Americans what slavery couldn't do, what Jim Crow couldn't do, what the harshest racism couldn't do, and that is to destroy the black family. Hoover Institute fellow Thomas Sowell concurs. The black family, which has survived centuries of slavery and discrimination, began rapidly disintegrating in the liberal welfare state that subsidized unwed pregnancy and changed welfare from an emergency rescue to a way of life. A way of life. You have people that you say, you vote for me, you keep getting a house, a roof over your head, food in your belly, and that's what you get. You're going to get the basic necessities. It's going to be a shitty life. There's going to be crime everywhere. You're going to be in a ghetto. but you're going to get, at least you're going to not be, on the street begging for food with your kids. People are going to vote for that because they have been brainwashed into believing that they can't get better. They don't have the ability to go out there and get more. Republicans sit here and say, no, we don't want you to be dependent. We want you to go out there and compete equally among everybody, and you can have anything you want that you're capable of going and obtaining. So white racism is a tool that the Democrat Party uses to agitate blacks and gain loyalty to their party. If we magically got rid of white racism toward blacks overnight, tomorrow, if you woke up in the morning and white racism had disappeared, this would do nothing to improve black test scores in school and in colleges, strengthen black families, reduce black on black crime. So I reject the notion that America is systematically racist. We do practice rational discrimination. Dinesh D'Souza is a great author. He's made some documentaries. He said, and he's really good at race. The way he confronts the lies that the Democrat Party and the liberal left has portrayed racism. He does really good at exposing the truth. And he says that rational discrimination allows us to say that we have a distinction to be made between rationality and morality. From the time Lincoln stood on the back of that train, he gave the Emancipation Proclamation to the 1950s, the black family was a stable bedrock. Left on its own to flourish, it would be the key proponent that would lead to the success of the majority of blacks in America today. As racism in the South dramatically declined, Southern identification with the Republican Party dramatically increased. So as racism went down in the South, those old Dixie Democrats, their kids and their grandkids and their grandkids said, no. We're not, we believe everybody's equal. When that went away, that's why you see the South flip to Republican. Yet the poor white racist Democrat never switched. Those Dixie Democrats that were pro-slavery, it was in their blood all the way, through the 50s and later, all the way, I mean, you can really go back to, like I said, I'm in my late 30s, my grandfather's generation and above. You had Democrat Party. They were a member of the Democrat Party because there was racism there. I'm not saying my grandfather was a racist. He definitely wasn't. I'm just saying his generation. So the Democrat Party remained the party of racism. The Republican appeal of free market, equal opportunity, and prosperity could not overcome the promises the Democrat Party offered black people. This left the blacks fleeing the party of emancipation and Lincoln and throwing themselves into the party of the Ku Klux Klan. Blacks actually traded for economic benefits, but they had to get in bed with the racists. And, I don't know, I wasn't there, but to me that just sounds so illogical, irrational. The North versus South idea is a disguise. The North versus South idea is a disguise to hide the responsibility of a major political party that was the party of slavery for 100 years. The Democrat Party has never changed. They are still the party of slavery. Only now blacks are bound with a new kind of chains. It's just one of those situations where I look around and I realize nothing has changed. The Democrats are still that party that fought to keep slavery. They still were the slave owners. Nothing has changed. They just said these people are too stupid. These people, all we need is their vote. So what are we going to do to make sure we keep their vote? Hey, we'll destroy their family unit. We'll destroy their culture. And how do we do that? Well, we'll make it the law that if they want to get these benefits, they want to get these social programs, this help, this compassion, this love, this we love you and we know you've been mistreated. So here, let's give you a handout in reparation of some form, which is not really a reparation, but you can have all that. We'll give you all that. But you got to subconsciously trade away everything that makes your culture have value. You take away all the values, the good qualities and good values out of culture. You're left with just, a savage mentality. And that's what you see. Again, I'm painting with a broad brush. There's plenty of black people that have, gotten out of this bucket, despite the crabs trying to pull them back in. But Democrats said, we're a party of slavery, but we can't be anymore. We can't be the party of slavery. At least to everybody's, the look, the appearance. We can't appear to be the party of slavery. But they always intended to stay the party of slavery. Now they just enslave black people for their votes. Now they just want them only for their votes. They destroy their family. You go back and you look and you say, some of the slave owners were brutal. Some of them were very the opposite of brutal. Some of them treated their slaves very well. That's not to say that the people weren't still slaves, and it was still wrong. It was. We'll go into that one day too. I mean, the actual brutal slave owners were very far and few between. Let's face it. If you had a slave, in that day and time, that was your tractor. That was your farm equipment. That was your livelihood. You didn't go around just beating everybody to a pulp on a regular basis just for fun. You weren't just some black guy dressed like Colonel Sanders out there just whipping people down and cutting people up and killing people and, raping their women and children daily. No, they needed good morale. They needed happy, healthy, strong people to go out there daily. They fed them well. They had to. You sit there and don't do maintenance on your tractor, never change the oil, never put gas in it, it's just going to quit working. And then you don't, get any crops. And that's not to really say and compare black people to a tractor. I'm just trying to use an analogy that makes sense. Black slaves were the livelihood of these people. And having healthy, hardworking black slaves that had a good morale and would go out every day and do that task was very important. So although there were horrible atrocities done, it wasn't the normal. It doesn't even make logical sense. I mean, sure, it's easy now because our kids are taught, it's taught in the colleges, that, every one of them was Colonel Sanders out there with a bullwhip just whipping everybody like Kunta Kinte, That's just not the case. But it did happen. So you go from that. Those same people said, hey, we don't have cotton anymore, but we still need slaves. The mindset has never changed. So they just bought them out. Now they're slaves for their vote. And, I think Democrats looked at that time and said, what's the greatest strength of the black culture? And family. Family was their bedrock. That was their one of their greatest. The sense of family. And that was such a strong thing for black culture in those times that, the family is a strong thing. That culture, I mean, look at the Hispanic culture. I mean, that's something that white people should, can look at and say that's a good quality, and just from Mexico. I mean, I live in Texas. I have a great deal of, I see a lot of Mexican food and culture. I work with Mexican people on a daily basis. And one of the things that I really, really like about their culture and I respect is their food. Number one is their food. I love their food. And just as equally is their sense of family, their family culture and the way they treat. They don't send grandparents off to die. I talk to Mexican people all the time at work, and, they sit here and they don't understand why white people want their kids to go off and be independent, go to school, go to college, be successful, raise their own family. They never want their kids to leave. Their mom and dad and their aunt and uncles, and their great uncles and their great grandmothers and whoever's alive all the way up, they all still live in their household. They take care of them, and they never want their kids to leave. And they want their kids to take care of them, and they want their grandkids there every day. That family culture is very strong. It's a very good thing. It's an attribute that's commendable. And the black culture back in those times was similar. It was very, very strong. And you have a man and a woman that marry each other, raise their children with good values. That's an unstoppable force. It's an unstoppable force that we can see through history now. And You destroy that and you leave fatherless households, mothers dependent on the government dime. Without the government dime, they can't put a roof over their head. They can't buy their kids, that pair of sneakers that so they can fit in on the basketball court, whatever, they may be doing. They're dependent on it. You take that away, they just can't bear it. So they're going to keep voting Democrat. So that's why black people vote Democrat. It's a sad truth that black people choose now to be enslaved. They were enslaved against their will by Democrats. They were freed by Republicans. And then they turned around and chose to be back enslaved in 1930s by Democrats, and they have been ever since. So take this as you want to. I know it's a controversial topic and issue. I think that if black people could recognize that they're being used for their vote only, and that Democrats could care less about them and their culture, you could start making a change. You could start destroying it. Now, that's not to say the Republican Party's got any better on its side. It's got its own share of bullshit. I'm really in between. I don't really, I've told you in my first podcast, I'm a little R Republican with Jeffersonian principles. I believe in federalism, and the Republicans do a shitty, poor job at promoting federalism and true freedom and sovereignty of a state. They're horrible. They're just as bad as Democrats, and I say they're worse because I hold them to a higher standard. But black people don't care about the Republican Party in general. And so, so their focus is on the Democrat Party and the fact that they're being used, they're being enslaved for nothing more than a vote. And nothing's more clear than a Democrat-run community. Let's look at any city in the United States that's primarily run by Democrats and black Democrats, run by black people that are Democrats. It's the black slave, that was the boss that kept other black people enslaved. That same mentality, they just can't break it. They can't break it. You give a black man power and let him become mayor and the police chief, and for all general purpose, they sit there and they keep all the other black people still enslaved. They're not there to actually help the culture get out. And then, the black community just as well have accepted this as okay behavior. It's the crabs in the bucket mentality. You get one black kid in school that says, I don't want to be a part of this culture. I want to grow up and go to college. I want to have a high GPA in high school. And I want to go off to college and become successful and get married and not cheat on my wife and have, 3 kids, and they all go off to college, and, I'm going to make $120,000 a year and become an engineer or this or that or whatever. And I'm going to drive a pickup truck, and my wife's going to drive a little, car or a Tahoe, and we're going to live in a normal, brick house in a normal neighborhood. They're looked down on. They're traitors to the black culture by the majority of black people. And that's sad. That's crabs in a bucket. As soon as one wants to almost get out, the rest grab them and pull them back in. And I don't understand that mentality at all. And I don't understand where that's come from, so to speak. There's been a lot of work that's been written about it. I've read, 20 articles on the subject, and none of it really makes complete sense to me why the black culture is that way, but it is. It's just a fact of life that black people have sold out their culture, sold out their family unit, their culture of family for, a welfare check, for some food stamps. And it's sad. It makes me angry. It makes me want to wake up black people and say, look at this con this Democrat Party is perpetrating on you. It's a simple trick. You were an easy mark. You were an easy victim. When they started this, you were willing to be conned. You willfully just handed over, everything for the handout because you really felt like you were faced with no other choice. But that was, not far from 100 years ago, 80-something years ago, 75, 80 years ago. That's when it all started. We're not there anymore. You don't have to take that handout anymore. Not only do you not have to take that handout, you want to go to college and you're black, if you have the same exact test scores as a white kid and that college needs black students, you get in before him. Sometimes, if the college needs black students, the white kid can have a better testing scores, can have better grades, and you still can get in with less grades because you're black. You get bumped to the front of the line and said, look, you want to go into medical school? There's a white kid over there that got a 4.3 because, he's better than a 4.0 because of all the extra stuff he did. He's the most brilliant kid in his high school. He was one of those brilliant kids in regular college, his first couple years of college, or whatever, 3-4 years of college. It's time to go into med school. And he's got this GPA. He's the most brilliant kid in the room. And you got a black kid that can have half of his test scores. Half is, at least on paper, intellectually, when it comes to, the testing and the scores of the test to show what his education level is and his intelligence level in that field. It's not to say he's less intelligent, but his intelligent level on that specific subject, which is the medical field, he could be half as intelligent. He'd be half as educated as a white kid. And he's still going to get into medical school over that white kid. There's cases that people have sued colleges for it. So there's zero reason. You sit here and tell a black kid, look, you grow up, you're born into a horrible culture of violence and poverty, but all you got to do is study and focus. All you got to do is get good grades. You don't even have to have the best grades. You can have less than all the white people you know, and you still can get in ahead of them. We'll cut you in front of all of them and put you at the front line because we want you to be successful. We're going to give you every opportunity. But instead, no, I'd rather go and make babies when I'm, not even out of high school. And so that those women can turn around and collect a whole bunch of welfare and then do drugs or sell drugs and continue this lifestyle, end up in prison, come back, be more dependent on more welfare. The cycle continues forever. And then you blame white people that you're in poverty? Come on. Get real. That's, it's time to let's take some personal responsibility. And I want black people to. Why? Because I know they can be successful. There's nothing holding them back. They're equal. They're equal. I don't think that there's any black person out there that is less valuable as a white person. And I think that if you took a white person or a black person and you turned the lights off in the room and we couldn't see what color they were, it doesn't matter to me. I want the best person for the job. You don't have affirmative action in basketball or football. No, you don't have people saying, look, we're going to make sure 50% of the team is white. No, the best person for the job that has the best abilities gets it. And it's majority black people. That's great. But I don't honestly believe that black people can't be successful lawyers and doctors. They can. They just don't try. They give up. It's easier to put all your money and hope to be an athlete. And if you don't do it, you fall back into that culture and you live that life that's just a slave to a Democrat Party that's using you just for votes. So take that for whatever you want. That's just my personal research, and it's my opinion. If you don't agree with it, well, you don't agree with it. I don't really care. I'm telling you the facts as I see them. And if you really listen to what my heart is on this issue, it's not that black people are less. It's not that black people are bad. It's that black people are pissing away an opportunity because I believe that they are equal as white people. They're the same. We're all people. And there's just as many black people out there that have the capability when they're born to be just as successful as white people. And the white people have plenty of, the same situation. There's a subculture of white people that it's a much smaller minority, where you've got the black culture, it's the majority. The majority of black culture, where the minority of black people will go on to be successful and live that life of success that's easily attainable. Where you got white people, the white culture is to be successful, and the minority is this subculture. And that subculture of white people are the same thing. They vote Democrat, and they sit around. They don't sit around and smoke pot as much as they do meth. It's their own. They got their own vices, and they got their own part to play. And they sit around and live an impoverished lifestyle and collect unemployment, collect welfare, collect food stamps. I know people that don't even go to work. They have like 6 kids and they live an impoverished lifestyle, and they sit around and do meth or smoke pot all day. And I've asked them, why don't you go work? Well, if I go work a minimum wage job or $10 an hour, I'd actually lose money. So they'd lose money if they go and work. So they're going to sit around, and guess what? They're always going to vote to make sure they keep getting that paycheck. But they're never going to be better than, 2, white trash people living in a trailer house with 6 kids that they had 6 kids so they could keep getting more and more welfare and food stamps. And they're never going to be better than that. They don't want better than that. So there are white people that are just the same. And same mentality anyway. It's a similar culture, and there's cultural differences. And usually the people on that subculture, both in the black community and the white community, are, let's face it, they're kind of the worst of your respective culture and your respective class and race of people. You get your white people like that. They're usually the racists. They're usually the meth dealers. They're usually, the white trash. And then you got black people on the other side of the aisle that are the same as them. They're taking the handout exactly the same. They're perpetuating that culture. They're just not, throwing a Confederate flag in the air. But they're also just as racist. They hate white people just the same. As much as the white people hate the black people. They're really the same people. They just have very small cultural differences. One is the Confederate flag toting, white trash, and the other is, this black trash mentality. It's the same thing. The problem is the black culture is the majority of that, where the white culture is the minority. It's a subculture, where the subculture in the black community is the success stories. That's what we need to flip. That's what I want to see flipped in the black culture. I want the black culture to have the majority of the culture is successful, and they will always have a subculture, just like the white community, that is just the trash. You're going to have trash. Every culture has it, and there's just people born that don't want better than what they can get for free or rob or steal or take. And I want to see equally across, and that's per capita, per population. I want to see that in equal proportion. If we can get there, I think that's, what more can you ask? That's when racism is gone. At least really truly gone. That's when equality is really met. Sure, you'll never get really, really rid of racism. It'll always be there in those subcultures. But leave those subcultures down there. I mean, they're in the bucket. They don't want out. Leave them there. And let that subculture keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller, hopefully. And so you don't want it to grow. Just let it it's there. You can't help those people. But you can help yourself if you're not in that little subculture. You're out of the bucket. You're a success. So you want to, if anything, this message, I want the black culture and society in America, the black people of America, to do the same thing. I want the majority to be successful, out of the bucket. And, they're going to have that subculture. And when you get everybody out of that bucket walking around, those people don't hate each other because of their skin color. They're too intelligent. They know that there's nothing there, that's all bullshit. That's all games that political parties and people play to get their vote. It's just bullshit. They're too intelligent for that. They're like, look, you can con those, the trash down there in the bucket, but you can't con me. And that's where we need to get. And when you get to that point, I think society as a whole, all society in the United States, will be, be where it should be today. And that's where we should be. So take it what you want. Next time we come back, I haven't decided on the topic yet. I got 4 or 5 floating around. Again, we're going to be making a Facebook page. We're going to be making a Twitter. We're going to start taking questions. We're going to start having guests. We're going to be doing a lot of cool stuff here on the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was episode 2, and it was titled, Why Do Black People Vote Democrat? I hope that was enjoyable. I hope you liked it, and we'll talk to you later.